This weekend, I'm wearing my other hat, that of a mental health counselor, and not my usual one of a political analyst. Driven by the pandemic, an entirely new, strange, and contradictory reality is staring us in the face. As the virus changes and mutates in lethality, we human beings are also changing along with it. We have been locked in a tussle with it for over 2 years now. Earlier, we were sitting ducks to its onslaught. But with vaccinations and new therapies, we are fighting it and somewhat winning the war, especially now with the sweep of the Omicron variant, which is less lethal. All this has made us physically tougher, more adaptable. We are learning new survival skills. Now, that is the good news. But the bad news is that the epidemic has taken a toll on our minds. Silently, insidiously, a mental health epidemic is sweeping the world. In the long term, this epidemic could turn out to be more lethal than the COVID epidemic. Let us talk about it. Hi, and welcome everyone to the weekend episode of the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is conversation and analysis of not only politics but of all subjects that are topical and touch the human heart. And my name is Juggi Bhasin. The single biggest reason that our mental state is becoming more fragile is because we are experiencing the pandemic of disruption, which has become the new normal. Take the work from home situation. There is a misleading belief that people have welcomed this development with open arms. It works very well for people who, as it were doing online work. But for most other people, the work from home rule means a lot of mental and physical adjustment. And when that does not happen, in many cases, depression and irritation sets in. The fact of the matter is that the freedom of working from home is a misleading concept. Most people actually enjoy going to offices because it breaks their home routine, brings them in contact with a new ecosystem and people, and invigorates them. Working from home is also a problem for some men who feel trapped and even inferior when working from their premises. An entirely new adjustment has to be made vis-a-vis housework, small, cramped spaces, and most importantly, sharing space with a spouse. That is not emotionally and culturally easy for many people. The work from home, the hybrid model of partly home and part office, and sometimes being trapped in a lockdown situation exerts enormous pressure on the mind. The big problem that is developing in these extraordinary times is the problem of disruption. And that too, not for economic reasons, but for health reasons. People have never focused so much on health matters and even survival as they are doing now. It is almost as if most of us are trapped in a dystopian scenario or movie with no hope for tomorrow. An excessive focus on health and survival puts unbearable pressure on the mind. Never before have all of us been so much exposed to death and suffering. Images of death and burning pyres, ambulances, and people gasping for oxygen haunt us. Everyone around us has a story to tell of someone who has suffered in the pandemic or died because of COVID. When a narrative of death and suffering and disruption seeps into one's life, even the toughest of minds can become enfeebled. And if this is the state of most of us, imagine the state of agony and suffering experienced by two of the most vulnerable segments in our society. I'm talking of kids. We are seriously now worried at the education and upbringing of our kids in the pandemic era. They don't get to go to schools, interact with their friends and teachers, and play on playgrounds. And online education sounds good on paper, but it is inadequate and stunting. It is like 2 years of their life have gone down the drain. For children in higher classes, the fear that they might not be competitive when they apply for higher specialized education and jobs is a real one. All this puts enormous stress on young minds. And then the other group, our parents, Our elders, our parents are the other most vulnerable group which are going through a terrible time. Because as one gets older, one has a sense that time is shrinking and that there are only so many years left in life. And if from that shrinking timeline, if 2 years of that time is lost in staying at home, unable to go out or go to parks for morning and evening walks to meet friends, then the agony and stress of that loss is enormous. Today we spend a huge amount of time online for work and entertainment, either because of pandemic necessity or out of lifestyle choices. It certainly brings entertainment and even our work to our doorstep, but the negatives outweigh the positives. Too much of online exposure ends up making us feel scratchy, unfulfilled, inadequate. It ends up increasing stress instead of alleviating it. When human beings are thrown in with each other for long periods of time in close proximity because of compulsion, it can never be a good thing for the workings of the mind. The mind, like the body, needs open spaces, freedom of movement and locomotion, different ecosystems to feel refreshed, alive, and charged up. The constant disruption of our routines disturbs our work life balance and puts us on the edge. Our tolerance levels are profoundly reducing, and stress, disorder, depression, other mental disorders, bowel irritation, fatigue, and even outbursts of sudden violent behavior are no longer the exception. They are becoming the norm. Strong in body but weak and vulnerable in the mind is the new epidemic in town. There are no vaccines available to combat this surge. We need to rediscover and relearn our basics to get back to normality. And so, on this note, I come to the end of the weekend special, which was on mental health, and I hope you like this particular episode. If you like the CAA show, please do subscribe to us. Subscription, as I keep saying, is absolutely free. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.